Okay, there she is. Legislator Marcotte, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please stand for a moment of contemplative silence for our great country, its people, and those serving it around the world. Thank you. Please be seated. Madam Clerk, the roll, please.
Majority Leader Borgia.
Here.
Minority Leader Tester.
Here.
Mr. Boykin. Here. Mr. Burrows. Here. Mr. Gelfarb. Here. Mr. Harcum.
Here.
Mr. Jenkins. Mr. Mazzano. Here. Ms. Marcotte. Here. Ms. Parker.
Here.
Ms. Perez.
Here.
Ms. Shimsky.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Spreckman. Here. Ms. Williams.
Here.
Mr. Williams.
Here.
Mr. Chairman.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Excellent. Call for a motion on consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the consent agenda with the following changes. On page 12, item number 18, a communication, item number 6893, add the Committee on Energy and Environment. On page 16, item number 40, item number 6915, take off the Charter Commission review and add the Committee on Infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Testa?
Agreed.
Mr. Mazzano? Yes. No objections, then the consent agenda is moved with those changes. Minutes approval?
Yes, I'd like to move the minutes of the Monday, March 27th, 2014, 7 p.m. meeting.
Mr. Testa? And Mr. Marzano? No objections? Minutes are approved at this time. The clerk, would you please read the rules for public comment?
Each speaker shall be limited to 3 minutes. I'll call the names of the speakers and ask that you please come down the aisle to my left and wait behind the black ropes. Murray Bowden, Ed Riley, Deirdre Curran, Susan Totten. The first speaker is Murray Bowden.
If I thought about it, I would have spoken when the kids were here because they would have understood this, but they're gone. This morning, I was at the, excuse me, sir. Thank you. I was at the budget meeting this morning. Vast mistake. Everybody was talking about electric cars, hybrid cars. The one thing you didn't mention is where the electricity comes from, because the electricity comes from a very bad place. They give me the opportunity to buy electricity from any one of 10 different companies. Con Edison told you they buy electricity, 1% comes from coal. Fallacy. If you buy it from the mountain up in New Hampshire, it's 0 from coal. But what they put in up there into the electric is not what comes out at my house. What comes out at my house comes from the worst coal burning plant in the United States, because if you get the chance to shut one plant down, you, of course, would shut the worst one down. I bought one of the earliest hybrid Highlanders because I wanted to support them. Years old. Today, in this area, electric is out, except for buses, because you recover all of the energy when the bus stops. It's a short one. And if you look at the numbers, over-the-road cars are not efficient. Jay and I disagree on most items. What he said this morning was absolutely correct. Those Fords, that 43 miles a gallon, there's no reason to have electric here. To build an infrastructure for a few cars, senseless. You've got solar panels out here. It's about one of the biggest frauds going, because the subsidy was from my taxes. You don't see any sun out there now. It was a lot of snow this winter. In the desert, they're building miles of solar panels, which is where they belong, because it doesn't snow, and the sun is there all the time. That's where solar panels, and the ones that we've built here, really the wrong thing to do. So nobody asked, where does that electricity, Dad, you want to close down Indian Point, right? How are you going to replace the electricity? Oh, we'll replace it with natural gas, but we need to build a new pipeline. Well, we don't want you to build a new pipeline. We'll put it out in the ocean and we'll bring it, no, you can't put it out there either. So we'll bring in electricity on new wires, but we can't put the new wires up. Which way do you want it? Do you want clean power? Yes. Clean power is, right now, gas. I have a Prius and I have a Highlander hybrid. I bought them to support them when they started. Tesla is making all electric cars. Why? They're developing new batteries that go twice as far for each pound of battery. They're a research company. They're not an electric car company. And they've gotten all these people to support them so that the new batteries for the buses that belong here, by the way, they were invented by a guy named John Walsh from New York City MTA, who I worked with him, and Harry and I went down to Bronx and explained it to him. I got an email from him.
Finish up your thoughts at this point, sir.
What?
3 minutes, if you could finish up your thoughts at this point. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
John Walsh emailed me on a particular item, and this has got to be 10, 15 years ago. And I emailed him back, before you went to Texas. He remembers me, and I remember him. There's a lot more that goes to this. I wish the kids had been here, because they would have understood you do a global analysis, not a, what went on this morning at that budget hearing was
Bowden, sir? Which part is
really,
the finishing up part?
really bad.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. Thank you. It's good to see you again, sir. Come back and join us.
Ed
Thank you.
Riley.
My name is Ed Riley. I'm from Croton. I'd like to remind you this anniversary of the incarceration of Kermit Gosnell, who specialized in killing children through abortion and infanticide after they were extricated from the womb in a process with Planned Parenthood referred to as post-delivery abortion? What is that? Gosnell is credited being with the largest mass murderer in the history of the United States. He was convicted on counts dealing with the murder of 8 children. He is estimated to have killed 300 to 400 children, specializing on Sundays. He operated for 25 years without inspection by the Pennsylvania authorities, mostly controlled by Democrats because it was in the city of Philadelphia, but also one pro-abortion Republican governor who was afraid if they closed Gosnell down, and everybody knew of this guy's reputation, like we didn't know what was going on. They knew what was going on. Well, there wouldn't be enough abortion mills in Philadelphia. Great logic. It's also the anniversary, plus a month, of the death of Jennifer Marbelli, one of our own from New Rochelle, and the death of her child, Madison, baby girl, killed by a notorious abortionist named Carhart. You wouldn't know it according to the papers, but a notorious nationwide abortionist named Carhart. Of course, this is in Maryland. You can kill anybody in Maryland if it's a child, get away with it. Nothing happened to Carhart. I was interested in the awards you give to these students at the beginning. It's probably their 3rd award, which means they got the 3rd award for the same event. And I'm always intrigued by the politicians who do more talking than the students themselves, or who actually earn the award. And of course, we know some politicians horn in on other person's glory, so to speak. But there's one thing missing in science in the United States, is a sense of ethics and morality. Chasing the dollar, that's not missing, and outright fraud. It's becoming commonplace in science. And I'll give you 2 examples. New York State allocated $500 million because of their abortion principles to the study of embryonic stem cell research, while adult stem cell research being done at this hospital over here, which we subsidized, was the only place they were making any progress. And California spent $3 billion to subsidize embryonic stem cell research when Tokyo University and the University of Wisconsin were making all the progress with 60 treatments in adult stem cell research. Our problem is not that these kids are so smart, is they don't have a set of morality to guide themselves.
Thank you, sir.
Deirdre Curran.
Good evening. I have a little bit of a sinus infection. I'm not talking too well tonight. Obviously, I'm here to speak to everybody about Playland. It's been an interesting couple of weeks. I was at the committee meetings, the last 2 committee meetings. I was at the Parking and Traffic Committee meeting where Sustainable Playland, again, was not able to give anybody any sense of a concrete plan of what they're going to do with all the cars when they take 50% of the parking lot for their field zone. And that meeting didn't go so well for them. And I think they knew that the next 2 meetings, the seeker meeting on the environmental issues and the next 2 meetings on financials, probably weren't going to go too well for them either. So they decided that maybe they'd take a step back. And the 2 excuses they gave for taking a step back were a lawsuit filed on December 31st by Legislator Jenkins that apparently they didn't have any problem with throughout the months of January, February, or March when they agreed to this schedule of review meetings, and suddenly it became a problem for them last week. And the letter that the City of Rye had every right to send, questioning and challenging the negative declaration on the seeker filing, which claims that there's absolutely no environmental impact on a construction project this big. I can't imagine where anybody would do a construction project this big in any municipality or county property and think that it didn't need serious environmental review, but apparently Sustainable Playland doesn't think that they do, and if you don't agree with them, they're not going to come back to your review process. I am offended as a Westchester County resident that they were permitted to walk away from the review process that they agreed to. I've been waiting over a year to get answers to the questions they were being asked. I wanted answers to the financial questions they were going to be asked, and I wanted answers to the environmental seeker questions they were going to be asked, and now I'm not going to get them anytime in the foreseeable future because they decided that they weren't going to come back and pursue the review process that they agreed to. I don't think they should have been allowed to walk away from the table like that. With all due respect to the committee chairman, I don't know why that was allowed. I'm not sure who's in charge of this process at this point. I don't know if it's Sustainable Playland or if it's Westchester County. I'd like to see them be told that if they don't get their back to the review table and start talking to people and answering questions again according to the schedule that they agreed to, that maybe they're going to forfeit their opportunity to run that park. We have waited long enough. There have been enough delays on this. The park is going to go through another season with nothing getting done, deteriorating more, no money going into it. This may at this point carry on into next season also. It's time to move forward. If they can't answer your questions and they can't explain their plan to you and they can't tell you how they're going to do what they say they want to do, you need to start looking at the other 2 alternatives you still have on the table, Central Amusements and Standard Amusements. It's time to move forward. Sustainable Playland can't get their act together. I think they're showing every time they're given an opportunity that they are not up to the job of running that amusement park on behalf of Westchester County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan Totten.
Good evening to the Board of Legislators. Regarding the SPI plan, I greatly appreciate all of your work during this review process of the Labor, Parks, Planning, and Housing Committee. A tremendous job. As of now, I'm very pleased. As of SPI, my wish would be that all of the Board of Legislators would vote no, all 17, so that the Westchester County budget could pay back the current SPI's cost up to now? And then can we add $1 to all Playland tickets this summer? Pay back their $100,000. Then let SPI start a new area nearby that would work for them somewhere else, outside fields and field house that they would want. To our county executive Astorino, can we please try one more time, as Playland is a National Historic Landmark, the premier amusement park, with the help of CAI, Central Amusement International, and we can bring it back the best ever.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have no other cards.
Seeing that no other cards, we'll close the public comment portion of the meeting. At this time, a note it's 7:30 and beyond. Call on Legislator Borgia for public hearing purposes.
Okay, I move that we suspend the regular order of business for the purposes of conducting 2 public hearings.
Notice of tonight's public hearings were published in the Journal News. I have proof of publication which is available for inspection in my office. Speakers shall be limited to 3 minutes. The first public hearing is from the Committees on Budget and Appropriations and Infrastructure on a proposed sewer modification to the Sawmill Valley Sanitary Sewer District by the removal of 3 parcels of properties in the town of Mount Pleasant and 1 parcel in the town of Newcastle. I have 1 card, Murray Bowden.
Let's see, 15 Leroy Place, 29 West Lily Lane, 40 West Lily Lane in Mount Pleasant, and 2292 Douglas Avenue in Newcastle. How the senior staff evaluates whether or not we should do this has become very important lately. There was an incident in the George Washington Bridge a few months ago, in September actually, where senior staff made a decision that shut down 2 to 3 lanes from Fort Lee. Senior staff being uncontrolled and not accountable to anybody. That changed. Senior staff now realizes that there is a responsibility to the public and to everybody else. Vast changes at the Port Authority, vast changes at New Jersey Transit, vast changes at the Turnpike. New York State Thruway's been pretty good all the time. The importance of discussing this particular item is to make everybody aware that when senior staff makes a recommendation for 4 parcels of land, that you're responsible that it's done in a responsible way. This is a new environment. What went on before September 2013 doesn't go on anymore. You should all be aware of your newfound responsibilities. What you passed over before and left alone without checking is over. This being a very simple example of how your responsibility is oversight. Be aware. Cameras, I carry it all the time. It's dated and location. And when somebody does something that's illegal, I take a picture and I send it to the proper authorities. It will get fixed. This is just an example of where we're going in a new way.
Mr. Chairman, I have no other cards.
Excellent.
I'd like to move that we close this public hearing.
Okay. Any disagreement? Okay. Public hearing closed.
Second public hearing is from the Committees on Budget and Appropriations and Infrastructure on a proposed sewer modification to the Mamaroneck Sanitary Sewer District by the removal of one parcel of property in the town of Harrison. Mr. Chairman, I have no cards.
Okay, seeing none, accept a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Okay, and public hearing closed. Madam Clerk, unfinished business.
Please note this item was held over from the March 24, 2014 regular board meeting and appears here as an item of unfinished business for action. Item 6737 from the Committees on Public Safety and Budget and Appropriations, an act authorizing the county to enter into an intermunicipal agreement with Peekskill in order to provide reimbursement for prisoner transportation to the county jail.
Ms. Marcotte?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to move this for the Budget Committee. However, I would like to make one amendment to the committee report, and that would be to add the language under item number 1, prisoner transportation, that reads as follows: except for prisoners arrested by the Westchester County Department of Public Safety. With that amendment, I'd be glad to move it and pass it on to my colleague, Legislator Gelfarb.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Committee on Public Safety, I would like to move this item. The change was one that we were all concerned about, namely whether or not our Department of Public Safety would continue to transport prisoners who the department had arrested from Peekskill to court proceedings. We have been reassured that with this change, it will now be the Department of Public Safety that will undertake this transport, and given that satisfaction, I move this item.
To the applicable committee chairs and members, thank you for your due diligence on this item, and with the consent of both committee chairs as amended. Any discussion at this time on the item? Legislator Borgia.
Thank you very much to the two committee chairs who've taken this up. I wanted to mention that the language is also within the intermunicipal agreement as well as the committee report.
Excellent. Any discussion, questions, thoughts? Otherwise, at this point, a long roll call on the item before us.
Ms. Borgia.
Yes.
Mr. Testa.
Yes.
Mr. Boykin.
Yes.
Mr. Burrows. Mr. Gelfarb.
Aye.
Mr. Harkam.
Yep.
Mr. Jenkins.
Yes.
Mr. Mazzano. Ms. Marcotte.
Aye.
Ms. Parker.
Yes.
Ms. Perez.
Yes.
Ms. Shimsky.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Spreckman.
Yes.
Ms. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Williams. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Approved 17-0. Takes us to standing committees.
I have it.
Item 6695 from the Committees on Budget and Appropriations and Infrastructure, a resolution finding there will be no significant adverse impact on the environment from the removal of 3 parcels of property in the town of Mount Pleasant and 1 parcel in the town of Newcastle.
Legislator Marcotte for budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So moved, and I'll pass this over to Legislator Shimsky.
Ms. Shimsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My comments apply equally to the first 4 items of the agenda, which involve 2 sets of sewer district removals. These, of course, are matters that come up on a semi-regular basis where properties that are not hooked up to the sanitary sewer system and have no reasonable likelihood of being hooked up to the sanitary sewer system are removed from the sewer district. We had the relevant personnel in from the Department of Environmental Facilities to question them about these, and these, by all indications, by competent personnel we've relied on over the years, are exactly what they appear to be. So for that reason, the Committee on Infrastructure was willing to approve these. As a final comment to those listening at home, from time to time, properties get added into the sewer district too, as in when there is new development. So there's a certain small amount of flux in the tax revenues and in the amount of sewage one way or the other, but they're really very, very small in terms of the totals in both, and they go up, they go down, depending on circumstances. Thank you.
Excellent. Without objection, take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6696 from the Committees on Budget and Appropriations and Infrastructure, an act to modify the Sawmill Valley Sanitary Sewer District by the removal of 3 parcels of property in the town of Mount Pleasant and 1 parcel in the town of Newcastle.
Legislator Marquardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For budget, so moved.
Legislator Shimsky.
As previously discussed, so moved.
Any legislative comment? Seeing none, take the previous roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6698 from the Committees on Budget Appropriations and Infrastructure, resolution finding there will be no significant adverse impact on the environment from the removal of 1 parcel of property in the town of Harrison.
Legislator Markup.
For budget, so moved.
Legislator Shimsky.
As previously discussed, so moved.
Any discussion? Those will take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6699 from the Committees on Budget Appropriations and Infrastructure, an act to modify the Mamaroneck Sanitary Sewer District by the removal of 1 parcel of property in the town of Harrison.
Legislator Markup.
For budget, so moved.
Legislator Shimsky.
As previously discussed, so moved.
And seeing no discussion, again, the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6733 from the Committees on Infrastructure, Budget Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects. A bond act authorizing the issuance of up to $4,400,000 in bonds of the county to finance capital project BO14C, exterior infrastructure repairs, White Plains Complex.
Legislator Markup.
For budget, so moved, and I'll defer to Legislator Smith on this item.
Mr. Smith.
As discussed and approved in the Economic Development Committee, I so move on to Infrastructure Committee.
Legislator Shimsky.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is funding for the third phase of a 4-phase project to make necessary repairs to the exterior of the White Plains office complex, and so moved.
Any legislative discussion on this? This will take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6736 from the Committees on Infrastructure, Budget Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects. Amended Bond Act authorizing the issuance of additional bonds of the county in the amount of up to $2,920,000 in bonds of the county to finance capital project B0086, Equipment Control System Upgrade, Central Heating Plant, Valhalla Campus.
Legislator Markup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to move it for budget, and I'll defer to Legislator Smith.
Mr. Smith.
As discussed and approved in the Economic Development Committee, I move on to Infrastructure Committee.
Yes, this project involves energy control saving updates and condensate system repairs to the central heating plant on the Valhalla campus. NYPA is working with the county as a consultant on this. They are doing the design. We are near the 90% completion point. The annual energy savings are expected to be in the neighborhood of $87,000 to $88,000 a year. This is a needed project, and it will create some energy benefits, so infrastructure is happy to vote it out. So moved.
Excellent. Any legislative comment? To those watching at home, understand that these bond acts, all legislation is vetted and tremendous amount of oversight shown and due diligence employed at the committee level. And individuals are more than welcome to come visit with us or watch on the web. So please understand that the 3 committees, in this particular case, and all committees, act very professionally, responsibly in employing their due diligence responsibilities in a very, very critical way. But at this time, seeing no other comment, we'll take the previous long roll call vote.
Approved 17-0. Item 6741 from the Committees on Infrastructure, Budget Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects. A resolution setting a public hearing to authorize the reallocation of approved expenditures for improvements in accordance with report of the Solid Waste Agency and adoption of a related bond act.
Legislator Markup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Public hearing will be scheduled for Monday, May 5th at 7:30.
Excellent. And to the other committees, Legislator Smith.
As discussed and approved in economic development, we'll move on to infrastructure.
Excellent. And Madam Chimsky, concur as well?
Infrastructure concurs.
Excellent, good. Seeing no discussion, previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Items 6, 7, 8, 8 from the Committees on Labor, Parks, Planning, and Housing, and Budget and Appropriations. An act authorizing the county to amend the mortgage agreement with apropos housing opportunities on the single-family house located at 39 Mill River Road, Newcastle, and modify the terms of the promissory note in order to reduce the amount of the mortgage and repayment amounts.
Legislator Markup.
So moved for budget. I'll defer this to Legislator Harkam.
Thank you, Legislator Marcotte. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was actually a modification of a loan to an affordable housing not-for-profit. The not-for-profit was actually able to cobble together more in outside funding, so the amount of the loan was actually less than the original papers were drawn. So this was a renegotiation and remodification of the payback schedule, which will begin immediately, and then those funds go back into the county's revolving loan fund. So move for housing.
Any legislative comment at this time? Otherwise, seeing none, we'll take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Items 6, 7, 9, 5 from the Committees on Public Safety and Budget and Appropriations. An act authorizing the county to enter into a regional partnership agreement with Dutchess and Putnam counties in order to receive funding from the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services under the Hazardous Materials Grant Program.
Legislator Markup.
So moved for budget, and I will refer this to Legislator Gelfarb for public safety.
Thank you, Legislator Marcotte. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We received an excellent presentation on this matter from the Department of Emergency Services. This is a fine example of shared services. We'll be entering into an agreement with Dutchess as well as Putnam counties. In applying for this money, the money will be granted to help ensure the safety of our public, in particular in connection with the radiological dangers. The equipment will help to detect and, if necessary, to prevent disasters in that area. So public safety strongly moves this project.
Excellent. Any legislative comment? Seeing none, take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Items 6, 7, 9, 6 from the Committees on Public Safety and Budget and Appropriations. An act authorizing the county to enter into an IMA with the City of Yonkers in order to provide reimbursement for prisoner transportation to the Westchester County Jail.
Legislator Markup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before passing this over to Legislator Gelfarb, I will move it for budget with offering the following amendment. The language under prisoner transportation to include except for prisoners arrested by the Westchester County Department of Public Safety. This is a change to the committee report, which is also in the IMA. Thank you.
Excellent. And Legislator Gelfarb.
Thank you once again, Legislator Marcotte. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Just as was the case with Peekskill, Public Safety moves this item. The only change to the item was to confirm our understanding in the event of prisoners who were arrested by our County Public Department of Public Safety, that the county police will continue to transport those prisoners to the county jail. With that assurance, so moved.
Excellent. Any comments, thoughts at this time? I do want to thank both committee chairs and thank Majority Leader, Legislator Borgia, for her due diligence and their due diligence on both these items, and the administration for being in agreement on this, so we get to move these forward. At this time, seeing no other discussion, we'll take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Items 6, 7, 9, 7 from the Committees on Labor, Parks, Planning, and Housing, and Budget and Appropriations. An act authorizing the county to consent to the release of .34 acres of real property located at Brook Street, New Rochelle, from the Declaration of Restrictive Covenants dated October 11, 2011.
Legislator Markup.
So moved for budget, and I'll pass this over to Legislator Harkam.
Mr. Harkam.
Thank you, Legislator Marcotte. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was .34 acres that the Planning Department determined was extraneous to the original project, and the covenant should be released. However, It should also be noted for the record that this property will be utilized in Phase 2 of the development. So moved.
Excellent. Any legislative discussion? Seeing none, we'll take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6847 from the Committee on Budget and Appropriations, a bond act authorizing the county to refund all or a portion of the outstanding 2003 Series D, 2009 Series B and C, 2010 Series A, B, and C1, 2011 Series A, B, and C, 2012 Series A, B, and C, 2013 Series B and C, and authorize the issuance of up to $558,325,000 of refunding bonds or so much thereof as may be necessary to refund such serial bonds.
Legislator Marcotte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As stated by the clerk, this is legislation for the refunding for a number of existing bonds. The net savings or the present value is approximately $163,000. It's a conservative number. It could actually be a little higher. The entire package will be sent up to the state controller for them to review. The Budget Committee vetted this at length with Commissioner of Finance, Emery Berg. I want to commend her on doing an outstanding job in putting this package together, and happy to move this for the Budget Committee.
Excellent. Any discussion at this time? Mr. Williams.
Just one point of a question more than, I understand refunding, basically. Generally, refunding assists in saving on interest costs, but it also changes often the terms, which is the maturity of the security. And I wanted to just find out, do you know whether there has been substantial changes in the maturity of the bonds that are being surrendered versus the reissuance, whether they're longer term versus shorter, as a general matter?
Certainly fair questions. Ms. Rhodes, perhaps?
I don't think that I think the final maturity dates have changed. But
Right.
the term of the bond hasn't changed. So the number of years outstanding.
Right.
They're refunding it over a 10-year period.
Yeah, but generally, when you refund, you're in the midst of, you can be refunding in the midst of a bond. Obviously, these are callable bonds. Basically, they're not, so you can call them without a penalty, or perhaps for a smaller penalty where it will still be cost effective. But the question is, when you call them, you might be calling in the middle of the maturity, let's say a 10-year maturity, maybe in year 7, basically. And what I was trying to find out is whether or not, as a general matter, if most of what we are refunding goes out longer versus, I can find, it's not a critical question, but I just wanted if it's known. Yeah.
The Playland bonds were because the number of them was in 2003. I don't think the other ones were.
Oh, is there a Playland? Okay.
That were issued in 2003.
Okay.
Ms. Marcotte, you wanted to also?
No, that was going to be the point, so.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Any other discussion? Perhaps we can call back one of those Intel semifinalist kids, and they can help us analyze this action before us. And I, too, want to thank our Finance Commissioner and the full board for taking this item up. Certainly savings on a present value basis is $163,000 is nothing to sneeze at and quite a good thing. Any other discussion at this time? Otherwise, we will take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6791 from the Committees on Infrastructure, Budget and Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects, an amended bond act authorizing the issuance of additional bonds of the county in the amount of $4 million to finance capital project RNWP1 North White Plains parking lot improvements.
Ms. Markup.
So moved for budget, and I'll pass this over to Legislator Smith.
Thank you, Legislator Marcotte, and thank you, Mr. Chair. This item deals with the redevelopment of the North White Plains parking lot, which we know, we've spoken in the prior term, where we funded $870,000 worth of design costs for this particular project, which act is being amended to add this in to include a total cost of $487,000. This will involve resurfacing of the parking lot. This will involve restriping. There is expectation that there will be additional spots available for this. In the joint committee meeting, there was discussions from Commissioner Kathy O'Connor and David DeLucia as to possible stormwater management issues associated with this site. There was some discussion as to a grand project, which was not within the economic scope of any project that we could take under this particular site. It is expected to start in the spring of September 2015, completed in fall 2015, and it is expected to be done with an effort to minimize disruption to the commuters. And with that, we pass on to infrastructure.
Excellent, thank you. Ms. Shimsky.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The reason why this particular project created a certain amount of controversy in the committee last week is, and this is not the only one, but this is a project where no design has officially begun, and the administration has returned for us to bond construction. Generally, when we bond for design, we expect to have design choices made and then come back and ask for the construction bond. Here, there were still design choices that need to be made, which will have some impact on the stormwater management, the ability of the parking lot to drain in a quick manner, which in a storm like the one we had last weekend along the Sawmill River Parkway would have made the difference between people being able to get to work conveniently and not on a particular work day. The chairman was kind enough to broker an agreement by which we would agree, since everyone agrees that the parking lot needs to be fixed, and that there are certain fairly straightforward choices on that we would move ahead with the construction bond on the condition that Parks comes back within the next couple months and talks to us about whether they plan to do some of the proposed work that they discussed in terms of underground tanks and certain plantings and so on. My committee will be watching to see the pattern of how many such projects come back to us. At the beginning of the term, as you know, Mr. Chairman, I was willing to exhibit a certain amount of flexibility on whether we bond for design as well as construction at the same time. I set up certain criteria and said I was willing to go beyond that on a case-by-case basis. As I said, I'm willing to move forward with this tonight on the basis of the agreement brokered by you, Mr. Chairman, but I am going to be watching the pattern fairly carefully as we go on, and those listening at home will hear about similar projects as we move on, and we're going to have to watch this very carefully. Thank you.
Any legislative comment or thought at this point? Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this particular point, on this type of bonding, I know there's been concerns in the past that many members have raised regarding doing both the design and the construction at the same time, mostly under the assertion that it would be more cost-effective because you would go out to the bond market once. But as all of us have found out during the particular course of time, that just hasn't been the case. We rarely go out to bonding for planning because it usually takes less than a year to have that done. It just gives the authorization and allows the funding to be juggled, if you will, inside the finance department. This is another particular example, and I thank the Chair Shimsky on this particular item. The work is necessary. It's work that has to be done, but from the course of business to ensure that we're doing the best that we can from a fiscal perspective and not over-borrowing or under-borrowing in specific cases, was always prudent to do at least the 60% design to be able to move forward. So I believe that the point the Chair just raised and said, watching very carefully, in this particular item, I'm not going to support this item because the design isn't done at this particular time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other legislators at this time? Ms. Shimsky, I'm sorry, Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had raised some questions in the committee meeting last week about this issue, and I don't really see why it's necessary, even in the interest of providing a stable interest rate for bonding. I really don't see why it's necessary at this juncture on this particular project in any case to bond for design and construction simultaneously. I think that the design bonding initially came through in 2012, was approved in 2013, and still there has been no design at all as of yet. So I feel that under the circumstances, it's difficult for me and impossible for me to vote for this as well.
Very good, Ms. Williams. Anybody else, legislators, at this time? My brief comments are, first of all, to the chairs. Thank you for vetting this to all the members. Ms. Shimsky, I think you set out a standard and you enunciated the very important word, flexibility. We certainly recognize as legislators circumstances and exceptions and the opportunity to move forward with the due diligence and the oversight we want. I will be in support of this, hoping others will as well, because of, frankly, the very detailed conversation that the three chairs had, and frankly, the good faith moving forward, recognition that this was important, but also further recognition that we will help track it through our good offices and central staff, and appreciate the flexibility in allowing us to move forward. And frankly, the confidence that we have in our support staff, and with the report back, we will, if you will, have our cake and eat it too. We will have a program moving forward in a low interest rate environment, but at the same time the accountability and the report back as to specifically which direction they go on some of the environmental initiatives, which is the one outstanding delta in this particular case. So I appreciate your, as chair, flexibility, and would urge colleagues to support this item with the understanding that we will continue to watch, and at the end, a good project will be effectuated. So at this point, any further discussion? Otherwise, we will take, we're all still here, so we will take the no, excuse me, probably a long roll call, forgive me.
Ms. Borgia?
Yes.
Mr. Testa?
Yes.
Mr. Boykin?
Yes.
Mr. Burrows? Yes. Mr. Gelfarb?
Aye.
Mr. Harkam?
Aye.
Mr. Jenkins?
No.
Mr. Maizano? Ms. Marcotte?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Yes.
Ms. Shimsky?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Spreckman? Ms. Williams?
No.
Mr. Williams? Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Approved 15-2. Item 6848 from the Committees on Infrastructure, Budget Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects, an amended bond act authorizing the issuance of bonds of the county in the amount of $9,978,000, which includes $1,110,000 in previously authorized bonds to finance capital project RBO 1Q Ashford Avenue Bridge over I-87 Sawmill Parkway, Ardsley.
Ms. Marcotte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So moved for budget.
Mr.
Thank
Smith.
you, Legislator Marcotte, as discussed and approved in the Economic Development Committee. I move on to infrastructure.
And Ms. Shimsky.
Would it ever be a meeting without mentioning the Ashford Avenue Bridge? We are now at the point where we are just shy of the 90% design. Landmark, I believe, once we get approval on the current documents from the Federal Highway Administration, where our documents currently are at this point, we will be at the 90% design point. We are slated to begin construction in spring of next year. As we know, this is something that's desperately needed. And when the concrete falls, it does not necessarily fall on my constituents alone. So it's time to get moving on this, and infrastructure was delighted to pass it out.
Any legislative discussion at this time? Madam Chair, Madam Shimsky, you deserve a lot of credit for your indefatigability on this particular project. To those going under and over this bridge forever, thank you. And we could probably waive our naming rights for the future and perhaps consider making it Legislator Shimsky's Bridge even before. So thank you very much and, for your work, and to the administration for moving this forward. And I think it's a good example of how working together, but yet with your focus and everyone's focus, that, and to Ms. Marcotte, of course, and Mr. Smith, of course, that this board is continuing to do good things. So we have the item before us. Any other legislative discussion? Seeing none. Long roll call on this one, please.
Ms. Borgia?
Yes.
Mr. Testa?
Yes.
Mr. Boykin?
Yes.
Mr. Burrows? Mr. Gelfarb?
Aye.
Mr. Harkam?
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mr. Maizano? Ms. Marcotte?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Yes.
Ms. Shimsky?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Spreckman?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Williams? Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Approved 7-0. Item 6851 from the Committees on Infrastructure, Budget Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects, an amended bond act authorizing the issuance of $3,440,000, which includes $640,000 in previously authorized bonds of the county to finance capital project B0085 Rehab MOB Elevator Infrastructure.
Ms. Markell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So moved for budget, and I will defer it to Legislator Smith.
Thank you, Legislator Marcotte. This refers to 5 elevators and 1 service elevator for this very building. Those of us who have traveled up to this floor are well aware of the shortcomings of the existing elevator service that dates back to the 1930s. Credit has got to be given to our building staff and the people who've worked on it over the years who have been effectively cannibalizing one elevator system after another to keep the systems running in best repair. They have reached well beyond their useful lives. This project is to rehabilitate those 5 elevators plus the 1 service elevator. It is expected to be an 18-month project. Each elevator and shaft should take 2 to 3 months to minimize disruption to the extent that it's not currently being disrupted currently. And with that, I'll move it on to the Infrastructure Committee.
Ms. Shimsky.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is an amendment to reflect construction costs. At this point, design is only 30% complete, but unlike the prior one, we actually have a substantial amount of design done. There seem to be no major surprises, and the bulk of this is going to be equipment purchases. So on that basis, I was willing to support the bond.
Legislators. Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this particular bond act, I just want to note again for the record, this thing started from an appropriations perspective in 2010 when we appropriated $340,000 for design. So this particular item has been a concern for a very long time as far as trying to keep those elevators going, and certainly as Chairman Smith just mentioned that there's congratulations due to our outstanding building staff for keeping it going. But the fact of the matter is that this has been lagging for several years, and I'm glad to see it moving forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other legislative discussion? Otherwise, long roll call.
Ms. Borgia?
Yes.
Mr. Testa?
Yes.
Mr. Boykin?
Yes.
Mr. Burrows? Mr. Gelfarb?
Aye.
Mr. Harkam?
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mr. Maizano? Ms. Marcotte?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Yes.
Ms. Shimsky?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Spreckman?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Williams? Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Approved 17-0. Item 6852 from the Committees on Infrastructure, Budget Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects, a bond act authorizing the issuance of $1,500,000 in bonds of the county to finance capital project B077B Infrastructure Rehab Peekskill District Office.
Ms. Markell.
Thank you. So moved for budget. I will defer this to Legislator Smith.
Thank you, Legislator Marcotte. This, as stated, goes to the Department of Social Services. It goes largely towards the replacement of air handlers that have reached the end of their useful life. These are the new air handlers are energy efficient and expected to generate savings. As passed and moved through the Economic Development Committee, we so move on to infrastructure.
Ms. Shimsky.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The repairs are going to largely be with the HVAC equipment, the exterior of the building, and the sidewalk, which is becoming hazardous for the residents of our county who use these offices. I would also request going forward Given the circumstances of this bond, I felt comfortable with this one in particular, but we have been, some of these bonds have not had detailed cost breakdowns of the various parts of the project included, and going forward, I hope that we'll get that paperwork a little bit more consistently.
Excellent. Any other legislators?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Only question I have on this particular item, especially given the various changes that have happened with our district offices, especially in the Department of Social Services, at a point in time, and I recall under this administration, the Astorino administration, I want to say that it was in 2012 that they talked about mothballing the Peekskill district office, not utilizing it at all. So the concern is just not that it's not necessary work in our buildings to make sure that we're protecting and preserving it, but if the Department of Social Services plan and continued plan was to vacate that office space as it wasn't necessary, and we had so much valuable space in other places, and potentially doing something else with this particular building, it would just be a concern about spending $1.5 million where the design is at its particular point. But again, Mr. Chairman, I just think that it has to be taken in context, not just with our Department of Public Works and Transportation, as well as our Department of Social Services, to make sure that the left hand is talking to the right hand. But again, the district office for Peekskill at one point in time was slated to close. Thank you.
We have no such understanding, nor was there testimony to that fact through all three committees. Appreciate your questioning and comments. Any of the legislators at this time? Madam Shimsky.
To that point, we did some questioning in committee. It's a building we own in fee simple, so we have to keep it up even if we were to sell it a couple years down the road. It would certainly affect its resale value if we were to let the aspects of the building in question go any further. I realized as we were doing this that it would probably be useful to have a discussion with the director of the real estate office at some point in the not-too-distant future on our strategies and our plans for our real estate, so we find out in advance if such things are in the offing, and it shouldn't just be something that we do on a case-by-case, but I would like to see it done in a more systematic way. The director has been out recently. I'm hoping that when she gets back and has a chance to clear her desk, we will have her down. And as I said, we can have a more comprehensive discussion as to what plans may or may not be in the offing down the road on all of our properties.
Excellent. Any other comments or questions? Conversely, the improvement that we do put into it runs with the building, and as you indicated, whether it's fee simple or otherwise, if in fact there was some kind of alienation, would benefit there. But again, we have no testimony to that fact, and we have this particular item that's before us at this time. Also, credit to you, Legislator Shimsky, because through our offices, central office, you have requested that our real estate director come down. Not inappropriate nor not unusual. Mr. Carrera, when he was in that position, the previous county executive often came to the board and apprised us of real estate rental and ownership opportunities and the administration's thinking. So I think you're one step ahead of it, and congratulations to you, and look forward to that meeting and facilitating that opportunity to get together. Before us now is this one item. Do we have any other discussion? Seeing none, we have Legislator Marzano back, but let's take a long roll call at this point.
Ms. Borgia?
Yes.
Mr. Testa?
Yes.
Mr. Boykin?
Yes.
Mr. Burrows? Yes. Mr. Gelfarb?
Aye.
Mr. Harkam?
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzano?
Yes.
Ms. Marcotte? Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Yes.
Ms. Shimsky?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Spreckman?
Yes.
Ms. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Approved 17-0. Item 6853 from the Committees on Infrastructure, Budget and Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects, a bond act authorizing the issuance of $2,400,000 in bonds of the county to finance capital project B0094 elevator rehab, Mount Vernon District Office.
Legislator Marcotte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. More elevator work, and I will refer this to Legislator Smith.
As you go up and down, thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Legislator Marcotte. This, too, is another elevator project. At this time, we're dealing with 4 vintage elevators in Mount Vernon and the county building in Mount Vernon District Office. Again, it is envisioned to be a 6-month design project. Each elevator is expected to be out of service for 2 to 3 months there, and it's fine. With that, we pass and move on to the Infrastructure Committee.
Ms. Shimsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This does fund design and construction, but again, given the dollar amount and the equipment to design breakdown involved, I was very happy to pass it out as such. This is a building we've owned since the 1990s. It's one of a core part of our county operations, and we certainly want the people who use it to be safe and convenienced and not inconvenienced in our elevators.
Excellent. Legislators, any comments, thoughts? Otherwise, seeing none, we'll take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6854 from the Committees on Infrastructure, Budget Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects, a bond act authorizing the issuance of $675,000 in bonds of the county to finance capital project B077A infrastructure improvements, district offices, Mount Kisco.
Ms. Marcotte.
So moved for budget.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Legislator Marcotte and Mr. Chair. As discussed and approved in Economic Development, I move it on to Infrastructure.
Ms. Shimsky.
The Mount Kisco District Office has also become a very important part of our operations. The boiler is in serious need of rehabilitation. There are questions about the air quality in the building at this point. So we really do need to do this work, and Infrastructure was happy to vote it out. Thank you.
Excellent. Legislators, any comment, thoughts? Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this the old Parks building in Mount Kisco?
What building?
This is in Mount Kisco. This would be the old Parks building where I guess the Department of Health is at now.
I believe that's right.
So we had the Parks Department, the Astorino administration moved the Parks Department out of this particular building, moved them down to 450 Sawmill River Road into that particular space to help do some consolidation. And then now we're having the Health Department move out of other spaces. And this gets, I guess, back to your point, Mr. Chairman. I know that over the past 4 years, we did ask for the non-existent Director of Real Estate, since there was not one until December of 2013, to come down and have the administration provide for us a view of the owned space versus the rented space, and what kind of options that we have, including the courthouse space, I believe, in New Rochelle with Mr. Mazzano, and Ms. Marcotte's area with the courthouse lease space that's still up in a challenging position. All of these modifications and bond acts are in our building, so that is not in question. The question, again, goes back to the entire strategy. So I would expect that we would have a strategy first, and then financing for that strategy second, so that we would be able to have a holistic viewpoint of this. So I'm looking forward to see the Director of Real Estate come down and have this particular discussion. But the Mount Kisco District Office, if I recall, was vacated, and then we moved the new Department of Health Commissioner up there, since that was her particular area. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments, legislators? Seeing none, we'll take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6855 from the Committees on Infrastructure, Budget and Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects, a bond act authorizing the issuance of $320,000 in bonds of the county to finance capital project B077A, infrastructure improvements, district offices, Mount Vernon.
Yes, Madam
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So moved for budget.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Legislator Marcotte. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As discussed and approved in the Economic Development Committee, so move on to infrastructure.
Mayor Shimsky?
This money is needed because we need to replace a beam in this building, and as we all know, without properly functioning beams, you could end up without much of a building. So this is a necessary repair, and infrastructure was happy to sign it out.
Excellent. Legislators, discussion, seeing none, previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6856 from the Committees on Infrastructure, Budget and Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects, a bond act authorizing the issuance of $400,000 in bonds of the county to finance capital project B077A, Infrastructure Improvements District Offices, Peekskill.
Markup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So moved for budget.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Legislator Marcotte. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As discussed in the Economic Development Committee, so moved on to infrastructure.
Mayor Shimsky?
This money is going to be used to replace an obsolete fire alarm system at the Peekskill District Office building, which I don't think anyone could find fault with. So moved for infrastructure.
Excellent. Legislators in discussion. Mr. Jenkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this part of the emergency, the building management systems? We had a significant project for all the county buildings in the OMS office space. For building management systems, I would expect and I would support and certainly think that the fire system would be part of that building management system that we did for all the buildings, and it was a significant expense. So I'm not sure if this is different from that, or is this above in addition to. Certainly we want to protect our buildings with whatever fire safety mechanisms that are necessary, but I thought it was part of the building management systems that we already approved.
Mr. Jenkins, I certainly would invite you to come to some of these committee meetings. I think some of these questions could perhaps be vetted at that time.
Well, Mr. Chairman, in all due respect, Mr. Chairman, that really doesn't matter, right? The questions for this particular item, Mr. Chairman, that on this fire system, that is a necessity for us to replace, that if there was a bond act that we already authorized to replace that system, then that would certainly be done work in the committee to identify that particular thing. I could read the legislation as well as everyone else can and understand that, in protecting our building space, that should be done. But thank you so much for the invitation, and I'll take that under consideration.
That would be great, and without interruption, my comment stands. You're certainly welcome to come to committees and not just read, but participate, and that would be most fruitful and wonderful. At this point, are there any other conversations, any other discussions?
To that point, Mr. Chairman, if Mr. Jenkins, in your research, if you have the bond number in question, I would certainly like to track it down. We could do that offline.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will certainly give you that information. Certainly, I'll be able to hand that to you as a member of this legislature. Of course, it'll take 2 weeks before I'm able to submit it to an agenda.
Excellent. Any other discussion at this time?
I will be willing to consider it in my discretion as chair before then.
Okay. At this point, seeing no further productive discussion, take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6790 from the Committees on Labor, Parks, Planning and Housing, Budget and Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects, a bond act authorizing the issuance of $375,000 in bonds of the county to finance capital project RMS02, Mearstead, site development, site work.
Legislator Marcotte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to move this for budget, and I will pass it over to Legislator Harcum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues will recall that at the end of last year, we passed a bond for design reconstruction of the main house. This is for, as Madam Clerk said, for site work, for the roadways, for parking, for drainage, and for landscaping. So moved, and pass it on to yield to economic development.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As discussed and approved in the Economic Development Committee, we submit and approve.
Mr. Harcum, thanks on behalf of the entire board for your work with Mearstead and so many of the parks, but certainly been standing with you for many years, and you've been equally strong on this, and good that we're certainly moving on a lot of these items. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thank you. Any discussion at this time? Seeing none, we will take the previous long roll call since all legislators are still here.
Approved 17-0. Item 6792 from the Committees on Labor, Parks, Planning, and Housing, Budget and Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects, a bond act authorizing the issuance of $110,000 in bonds of the county to finance capital project RKDO4, Kensico Dam Plaza Infrastructure Site Work 2.
Ms. Markup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will move this for budget and pass it over to Legislator Smith.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Legislator Marcotte. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is $110,000 for work at the Kensico Dam Plaza infrastructure, which will include rehabilitation of the existing playground and picnic area and replacement of the perimeter area trees. Just in the context, as many legislators and the community is well aware, is that the park has shut down currently for the current project, and which is very unusual for the parks to actually take a park out of commission, as despite the weather, they still believe that the recommissioning and bringing this park back online is targeted for May of this year, which I think people will be looking forward to. This next project is expected to have limited disruption to the Kensico Park, and is not, there are no plans to take the park offline for this particular project. And with that, we'll move on, as was approved in the Economic Development, and we'll move on to Labor and Parks.
Mr. Harcum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As discussed, so moved.
Excellent. Discussion at this time. Seeing none, we'll take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6793 from the Committees on Labor, Parks, Planning, and Housing, Budget and Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects, a bond act authorizing the issuance of $340,000 in bonds of the county to finance capital project RM101 Marshlands Building renovation.
Ms. Markup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After a lengthy discussion in budget, I'm happy to move this and pass it over to Legislator Harcum.
Mr. Harcum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for design of rehabilitation and expansion of the Nature Center at the Marshlands. Improvements would include expanding the exhibit area, the meeting rooms, storage space, additional office space, expanding the restrooms, additional infrastructure. We've also discussed stormwater, and the Parks Department said they're also considering the possibility of solar. So moved, and without passing.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Legislator Harcum. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As discussed and approved in the Economic Development Committee, we move for vote.
Excellent. Legislators, any comment, thoughts? Otherwise, previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6794 from the Committees on Labor, Parks, Planning, and Housing, Budget and Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects, a bond act authorizing the issuance of $110,000 in bonds of the county to finance capital project RLEN1 Lenmore Preserve Infrastructure Site Work.
Ms. Markup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to move this for budget and pass it over to Legislator Harcum.
Mr. Harcum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for the design of the rehabilitation of the terraced retaining walls, associated engineering, landscaping, et cetera, thoroughly vetted by Labor, Parks, Housing, and Planning. And with that, we'll pass it over to Economic Development. So moved.
And Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Harcum. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As discussed and approved by the Economic Development Committee, we move forward with a vote.
Excellent. Legislators, any comments, thoughts? Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This particular item on Lenoir Preserve was first appropriated in 2011 for $460,000. In 2014, what's in front of us now is an additional $110,000. This particular site is on the border of Mr. Burroughs and my district. I think that it doesn't reflect Mr. Burroughs' portion of the legislative district in the project fact sheet. But the question, Mr. Chairman, And I know that this was discussed in the committee, but this is something that we need to consider as well, as we did all these projects earlier this evening where we waited to do design and construction separately. We did $460,000 on this particular project in 2011, and then we added $110,000, which is being proposed tonight, for a total of about $570,000 of design costs. This project is supposed to be $5,770,000, which, as you have always noted, is about 10% of the project cost. So the administration took 3 years to determine that the project, that design was going to be $570,000, which is what we're in front of us now. So again, Mr. Chairman, I think that in the design flow, with the design and construction management process that's been in place, it seems like it's worked pretty well, and this is another example of why those decisions are made to design, to break up design and construction management. But in this particular case, this particular work is long awaited, very long awaited for those folks in the northern western part of Yonkers, specifically that Lenoir fencing, and I'm glad to see it's being done now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Any comments, thoughts? I think just my only comment would be that it kind of proves, I think, the point I made earlier, which is each and every project has its own cadence and its own fact pattern, and we need to be flexible enough, again, back to Legislator Shimsky's word on that, accountable and flexible. Those are two good adjectives that I think will hold us in good stead. Ms. Shimsky.
I just want to note that the property in question either borders or comes within a few yards of bordering my district as well. And this is parkland that's beloved by a lot of people in my district as well. And it's a good thing that the particular repairs here are going to be done.
Excellent.
We hope they do get done soon.
Good. Any legislators comment at this point? Otherwise, good environmental work, everybody, and take the previous long roll call.
Approved 17-0. Item 6732 from the Committees on Infrastructure, Budget and Appropriations, and Economic Development and Capital Projects. A bond act authorizing the issuance of up to $705,000 in bonds of the county to finance capital project RB 127 Fort Hill Road, Yonkers.
Yes, Ms. Markup.
Thank you. So moved for budget.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Legislator Marcotte. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As discussed and approved in the Economic Development Committee, I move forward on to the Construction Committee.
And Ms. Shimsky.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, it's my understanding that the chairpersons of Budget and Economic Development have agreed to use the committee report from the Infrastructure Committee, which more completely sets forth the information on timeline. This road is one of the main feeder roads to Central Avenue, and as such is a road with a very high traffic count. It's also in pretty bad shape. It clearly needs to be fixed. However, we have a number of variables in play right now. We are expected to receive by the end of the month the new road condition rating report. We have not had a new one since 2010, as reflected in this committee report. And of course, with the really rough winter our roads have had, that report may not accurately reflect the relative conditions of the roads in our system. So as we move forward, we are going to have to think really hard about ways to make sure we properly prioritize and get our roads to the point that our people expect them
So
to be.
I will to understand the motion that you've made,
Yes.
the committee report through your committee, and do the two chairs of the respective committees accept the conforming committee report. And for the record, and again, we've all lived it, but just understand once again that through comment, Legislator Shimsky's, all of our good discussions and the administrative agreement, we are going to add to our committee reports on a going forward basis. This is one that was in transition on the process, the use of consultants or not, and the consideration of expected time of completion and other factors that are key and components of history, so that the record best reflects the project before us. So thank you, legislator, for leading us in that discussion. With that said, then, we have a singular item before us, and with all conforming pieces, do we have any discussion at this time? Long roll call. Actually, we can take the previous long roll call. We have all legislators that are here without objection.
Approved 17-0. Motions, resolutions, call of the districts.
Ms. Shimsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under my name is included Julius Chemka, former mayor of the Village of Hastings-on-Hudson and father of our Deputy Commissioner for Transportation, Patty Chemka. I suspect that all legislators will want to be included on that one.
Surely. Of course. Mr. Delphorp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise with respect to the name of Dr. Philip Anthony Maricini, who is on the list of those who have passed. Dr. Maricini was a tremendous asset to the people of the Village of Harrison and to my district. He was 94 years old at the time of his passing, a long-serving doctor in the community, and he is also the father of Chief Anthony Maricini, who's been serving as a police officer in the Village of Harrison for a very long time and has been the chief and continues to be chief of the Village of Harrison Police Force. He's also the father of Phil Maricini, who has served as mayor and supervisor of the town Village of Harrison. I believe that was back in the 90s. I'd like to just reinforce what a tremendous career Dr. Maricini had and how he's the dad of two outstanding public servants of the Village of Harrison.
Would you like all legislators to join you on that?
Thank you for reminding me, Mr. Chairman. I would ask that all legislators join on this resolution.
I'm sure that's appropriate, of course. Legislators at this time on motions, Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to join Mr. Burrows with Frank Stallo, who's certainly a member, well-respected member of the Yonkers community, a former police officer, Columbia Society, if I recall correctly, and certainly in Tucklock, right, organization. So, thanks, Mr. Burrows.
So noted.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, maybe all Yonkers legislator would like to join Mr. Jenkins.
Appropriate. Sure. Okay.
Just a suggestion, but I'd like to join Mr.
Sure.
Jenkins. Thank you.
That's 3 out of 4. Ms. Sprecken, I'm sure will join you on that.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Parker.
I would also like to join on that. Frank Stillo was a sergeant detective for the Larchmont Police Department, so I would like my name added as
Why
well.
don't all legislators join, certainly in recognition of Mr. Stallo's career. Thank you. Any other motions, resolutions, call of the district? Otherwise, at this point, we rise, please, for a moment of silence in memory of all those that we are noting their passing. This time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we adjourn this meeting and reconvene at our regularly scheduled May meeting, May 5th, 2014, at 7 p.m.
Mr. Testa? Roll call?
Ms. Borgia?
Yes.
Mr. Testa? Mr. Mazzano?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye. We are adjourned. Good evening, everybody. Good luck on whatever your basketball